Welcome to the FEMCAST, where women's voices aren't just heard, they're amplified. This is more than a podcast, it's a movement. A space where we break the silence, spark conversations, and stand together for equality, inclusion, and change. Every episode, we bring stories, ideas, and voices that challenge, inspire, and empower. So if you believe in the power of women's voices to change the world, hit subscribe and join our community across social media at The FEMCAST. Or visit our website, www.thefemcast.com. Together we rise, we roar, we rewrite the narrative. This is The FEMCAST, and I'm your host, Anita Whyte Moran. What if the real problem in toxic workplaces isn't bad management, but broken empathy? In this episode of the Gaslit Brain series, bestselling author Dr Jen Fraser and I expose the mind games and neuroscience behind controlled bullying and gaslighting at work. Because when empathy circuits in the brain shut down, something dangerous happens. People stop seeing colleagues as human and start treating them as threats or tools. This is where manipulation thrives, where silence is rewarded, and where psychological safety disappears. We explore how empathy can be taught, modelled, and rebuilt, and why without it, workplaces become breeding grounds for abuse and fear. We unpack how self-regulation, co-regulation, and simple acts of kindness can literally rewire the brain and transform how teams lead, listen, and connect. If you've ever worked under a bullying boss or been gaslit at work, this episode will change how you see it and how you can heal from it. Without empathy, the workplace becomes a battlefield. With it, it becomes a community where everyone thrives. This is the FEMCAST, and I'm your host, Anita Whyte Moran. You're very welcome back, Jen, today, and we're diving into the skill that is essential to healing and to human connection, empathic listening, following on from last week. And not only listening, but how we can actually teach empathy, because we often treat empathy like it's something you either have or you don't, when in reality it's a skill that can be learned, strengthened, and modelled. So Jen, I'm really glad we're having this conversation today, because I suppose empathy is at the heart of everything we do. And if we want to heal and build healthier cultures, society, communities, empathy is the way forward and the only way forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautifully said. That's exactly the case. And what people don't know or understand, just because it's never taught to us, empathy, as we've discussed, is actually circuitry in your brain. And your brain is very much like a muscle. It's comparable to a muscle. You can strengthen your muscle or you can weaken it. Empathy is like that. We can strengthen our empathic neural networks or we can weaken them by not using them. Whenever we don't use things in the brain, they start to get impacted. And empathy in particular is very vulnerable to onslaughts of neglect, onslaughts of abuse, onslaughts of bullying. That will reduce your empathy because the brain goes into survival mode and it gets very reactive and it starts to lash out and it starts to run away and respond to its stress in all kinds of different ways. That's putting a ton of resources into stress and not into building the empathy. Building the empathy happens when you feel safe, when you feel seen, when you feel heard, when you're not being judged. And so this is why, just as you described, it's arguably, certainly experts in empathy, neuroscientists say it's the most important skill to train in humanity.
Yeah. And a lot of people do believe that you either have it or you don't. And I suppose we can talk about how it isn't something that we're born with, but how as a child you develop empathy.
Well, even more miraculously, we actually are born with it. Empathy is wired into our brains at birth. And that's why it's particularly sad that so many people end up with eroded empathy, because it means that their upbringing, their schooling, their sport experience, their church experience, all of these factors totally affected their brain development in negative ways, and it hurt their empathy. Now, to your point, Anita, that doesn't mean we can't build it back up. And that should be our mission. If we've allowed a child to grow up and have their empathy damaged, then it's on society to put a lot of resources into getting it back up and running, because it solves problems like self-medicating with substances, like domestic violence, like criminality, problems in the workplace. I mean, we could go on and on and on. It's really a worthwhile intervention is to build empathy. And, one of the most important ways in society that we did build up our empathy was in reading fiction, reading literature, not just light books that are detective stories or this or that, or, superficial kinds of tales or things that confirmed our own biases. No, really challenging, really good, really rich literature opens you up empathically because you start to actually, through the process of reading, you are experiencing the world through a character. And all of that was so good for the brain. We get it from television, we get it from movies, but there's nothing quite like the textual version. We get it from music, even. We get it from art, but especially reading, where we actually mentally are morphing with a character and living in their world and seeing the world through their eyes and their heart and their mind. And that makes us understand one another in much richer, more sensitive ways.
Actually, now that you say that, and a book that really stayed with me is by the author John Boyne. He's Irish, and it's called The Heart's Invisible Furies. Have you ever read it?
No.
Sarah Jessica Parker actually is a big fan of his, but it's absolutely brilliant. I read it years ago when I was in the Writer Centre and I was doing a course. And when actually she had read out the first page, and that hook that gets you in. And I just remember going, oh my God. And I said to her, what book is this? And she explains what book it is. And she says, that's how you get a hook and that's how you get them in. And I came home that night, downloaded it, and I think I stayed up till 3 or 4 reading it. And then I finished it the next day, which is unheard of. And that's how I got back into reading, consistently reading. And I just thought it was fantastic. And I've never read a book where you felt every emotion, like the rage you feel at the treatment, the softness you feel where she has to leave. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. And then all the characters that come in later. It was just the best of storytelling and getting people to actually put themselves in the position of that woman, her son, and circumstances. It was just amazing.
Well, I definitely have to read it. I taught literature for years, and one of the greatest compliments that I ever got from my students was that they didn't used to like reading, but after the class, they fell in love with reading again. Because what we have to do always is find books that speak to our young people, not try and tell them, oh, I read this and I loved it, and so you will. Everything's changing so quickly. The key is to find books that, just as you described, they can't put down, but are also literary, that also, activate all these empathy centers in our brains, not just superficial literature.
Last week, we explained empathy and sympathy, and empathy, putting yourselves in the shoes of the person and actively listening. So why aren't we teaching this to children?
Well, leading researchers in the field ask the same question. They talk about how is it possible that empathy is not a core component of every single grade at school. It should be taught daily, weekly. And, teachers, of course, they teach it in all kinds of different ways. Excellent teachers, and there's many, many of them, they do teach empathy, and they acknowledge it and they see it in their students. But there's room for lots more. We wouldn't have the kinds of world issues, the geopolitical issues we're having today, the tearing apart of our own societies, even if we were much better trained in empathy. So I think for you and me to go through this exercise and show people a way to do it. First, let me just give you one point. This is from a researcher at Harvard, and she teaches empathy in the workplace. And she talks about how important it is to remember to look into someone's eyes. And she says, these are busy professionals. She works with a lot of doctors, and, they're so intellectual and cerebral, and they've got so much pressure on them and so on and so forth, they could forget. But she says, just make yourself aware that you need to look into the person's eyes and then register the color of their eyes and use that as a way to kind of hold yourself accountable so that you are sure that you're making that connection, that they're meeting your eyes and you're looking into their eyes. So this would be a good example of an applicable skill when you are trying to build up your empathy. But so this empathic listening exercise that you and I are going to do today, this was taught to me by an absolutely brilliant psychologist, Dr. Leanne Gray, who's an American. And I spent about 7 or 8 sessions being taught by her how to do this. And it's like mindfulness, where if I described it to you, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so easy. That's just simple. Of course I can do that. But it's quite different when you actually try to do it. It's much more difficult than you would think. And so first you and I will demonstrate it. And then afterwards we'll switch roles, and then we'll do it again. And then we'll talk about the challenges so that people can understand that if they hit these obstacles and challenges and roadblocks, it's not because they're not doing a good job. It means they're struggling with how hard it is to do. So I want people, first of all, to just almost close your eyes or look within and think about a person with whom you've had a disagreement with. So it could be a spouse, maybe your teenager, could be a colleague at work, maybe your parent, someone who, maybe it's someone who's on the other side of the political fence, or someone who doesn't understand the issues that are your passions. It could be anything, someone from a different religion. And you just feel furious when you talk to them. Okay, so that is the person that you want to get really skilled at not being so activated, not being so emotional, not being so full of your own desire to put forth your ideas. But you want to learn how to listen to them, how to truly hear them. Okay, so first of all, Dr. Leanne Gray would teach me that it's important to set an intention. So you could do any ritual thing you wanted. She would light a candle, or you could make a sound. You could close your eyes and do deep breathing for a few moments until your system felt grounded. Make sure that you're really in your body, like you're aware of your seat. You've got your feet on the floor. You want to be as grounded as possible before you challenge yourself in this way. It's like mindfulness that way. So, take a deep breath and just let it go. And we'll set the intention for building up our empathy neural networks. That's our intention today. Okay, so Anita's job is she has been in a fascinating conference all day in Dublin, and she is going to tell me about the conference until she feels heard. And when she feels that I truly heard her, she's going to say those ritual words, I feel heard. And then we're going to switch roles. So what Anita needs to do to help me is she needs to speak in sort of 60 seconds, 90 seconds. She can't go on too long, or I won't be able to replay back to her what she said. So my job as listener, I'm not allowed to say anything. I can't show any verbal or nonverbal reaction. I can't roll my eyes. I can't sigh. I can't laugh. I can't insert any kind of joke or comment or clarification. I am not allowed to react on any level. My only job is to repeat as accurately as possible back to Anita what she has told me. And we'll talk after on how this affects how you listen. Okay, so Anita, you've been in a conference all day in Dublin. Please tell us about it.
So today I was at a conference in Dublin, it's Pride at Work. An activist got up, she opened the meeting, and she's well known here in Ireland, Ailsa Smith. And she was talking about dignity and respect at work, and how one world leader has totally diminished, minimized, and uprooted decades and decades of fighting for rights.
Okay, so today you were at a conference called Pride at Work. And it was opened up by a well-known activist in Ireland, Elva Smith. And she talked about how there are vulnerable people who, for decades, there has been all kinds of work done to try and protect their rights at work. And all of a sudden, in a matter of months, these rights have been dismantled and discarded. And it's so harmful.
Yes. I feel so hard. You heard everything I said, because I was enraged when, in a matter of months, when you see decades of work, and it's not just, let's write up this policy and put it in place. It's getting out on the streets, it's marching, it's fighting, it's people giving up so much time, it's volunteers. And to see one person come in and dismantle all that in a matter of months is shocking and so sad.
So you felt completely upset by the fact that it's not just policy writing, it's not just sort of work behind the scenes that's being done at a high level. It's a very much an on the ground, people protesting, people putting their full selves into making this kind of change at work. And it's gone on for a long time. And then within, months, this leader has completely upended the system and all of this hard work and suffering basically to make this happen. And to you, it's upsetting and shocking even.
Yeah. I suppose there is a bit of discrimination in workplaces with women, but it's not about my sexuality. And they have to deal with that. And I know how hard it can be as a woman in workplaces, in society. But for them, and like these would have been grassroots years ago, getting up, saying we want better, we want more rights, we want to be able to come out and be ourselves, because they deserve that. They're human beings like the rest of us. And it's their human right to feel safe in workplaces. And now they don't. So they're getting up every day and now they no longer feel safe. Their job isn't safe. They don't feel safe. And that saddens me.
So when you went to this conference, you were very aware of, yes, you're a woman, and so you have a certain amount of discrimination against you, but you don't even think it compares to what LGBTQ and trans people are experiencing when they go to the workplace, and that it took them so long and they fought so hard to be able to share who they are, and that they deserve safety and they deserve rights and they just want to be accepted. And they built that. And all of a sudden it's being ripped away from them, where they no longer can tell their own story, be their own free selves. They are at risk and they're aware they're at risk. And every time they go to the workplace, when they wake up every single day, they have to go through that fear. And it's very real fear about their safety, about the security of their job, and about how they're just basically not accepted. And for you emotionally, it brings you a lot of sadness.
Yeah. They're so vulnerable. And in 2025, that we're rolling back on rights when people deserve respect and to feel safe. I always come back to this. People deserve to feel safe. It's not an employer's gift to us. It's our human right.
So the key line for you is people deserve to feel safe. Every single person.
Mm-hmm.
It's every single person's right. It's not a privilege bestowed upon the worker by the employer. It is a human right.
Mm-hmm.
And these people don't feel safe.
No. Wow, Jen, you really are a great listener. Like you've just mirrored and repeated everything I've said.
Well, I noticed something I was doing wrong. Because I agree with you and I know you very well, I was nodding my head like, yes, Anita, which is a nonverbal gesture that's completely inappropriate when you're doing empathic listening. I should be just a blank screen. I should not be conveying anything to you, no disapproval and no encouragement. So that, just goes to show you, I've done this for quite a while. I've been trained by the best, Dr. Leanne Gray, and I still struggle. I still have to work on it. So let's flip the table now. I'll tell you some things and you repeat back to me and see how it feels for you. So trying to do even better than I did. You don't want to be agreeing with me or nodding or anything. You're trying to be neutral as possible and just keep your focus on being able to relay back to me what I said. Let me just think about what I'm going to tell you. So today I wrote an article for Psychology Today about medical gaslighting. And I was looking at the research into patients who feel like they tell their doctor about symptoms. So they might say, they have terrible abdominal pain, or they have excruciating back pain, or they're suffering from dizziness. And the doctor dismisses their symptoms, which they feel is a form of gaslighting. It's like the doctor says to them, don't trust yourself. Don't trust your experience. Just listen to me.
Okay, so today you wrote an article for Psychology Today, and you're talking about medical gaslighting and a patient presenting to a doctor who tells the doctor about their symptoms, excruciating back pain, dizziness, and their symptoms are minimized and dismissed. And they feel gaslit, and the doctor is minimizing their symptoms.
So what I learned in studying what the experts say is that doctors are not gaslighting in the traditional sense of the word. So gaslighting has within it an agenda. You're doing it because you purposefully want to mislead somebody into not trusting themselves. And doctors are not doing that. According to researchers, there are serious problems that are leading to doctors dismissing and denying proper care to patients, but it isn't a desire to manipulate and deceive.
Okay, so people who use the phrase, I'm being gaslit by my doctor, isn't intentional on the doctor's part because it's not a case of tactics or manipulation. They're not minimizing the symptoms as such. They are coming up with their, I suppose, medical expertise and saying, this is what I think it is. And the patient doesn't feel listened to. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And I'll just say one last part about it, and then we'll talk about the experience of empathic listening. So what the researchers have found is that there are pressures on doctors and also problems with their training and even sometimes a personality issue. So I look in the article at 5 different things. One of them is patients and doctors don't have enough time together. There's a scheduling issue so that the doctor doesn't have the opportunity to truly listen and hear them. There are unconscious biases. So LGBTQ or women or old people, young people, people of color, they will have issues, unconscious biases that make them dismiss and deny proper care. I'll just give you a third one. Sometimes it has to do with arrogance, where the training is so intensive to believe that they are the expert, they are the authority, and their job is to make the diagnosis. And so they're not able to entertain a patient who says, but, or I don't think you see, or you don't understand.
Okay, that was a lot for me to remember, but I'll try. So you look at the research, you look at 5 parts, and it can be, one part is the doctor and patient don't have enough time together. The second part can be arrogance. And the third part then can be the patient going, but you're not listening, or but I feel.
The third one is implicit bias.
I couldn't remember that phrase.
So what I would say, what I find really interesting in this experience is that you are a natural at empathic listening. You're really good at taking this information into your brain. You rearrange it in the minute, in the moment. You rearrange it and you say it back perfectly, but in kind of in your own way that's sometimes even more articulate than what I said to you. So I think that's a bit of a gift of the journalist. You know, you are educated and trained in paying very close observational attention to things and to hearing people and to interviewing people. And it shows up in your empathic listening.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
So when I did it with Dr. Leanne Gray, what I found was it took a lot of effort for me to resist wanting to jump in. I wanted to jump in, just like you saw me nodding. I have a tendency to, I think it's because I was a teacher for a long time. And if you teach young people, teenagers, 20-somethings, and they're shy or they're awkward or they're struggling to find the right words, it's so important as a teacher that you create this response that gives them the courage and makes them feel that they can do it, this kind of thing. So I noticed in myself, that's just a curse in empathic listening. You're not supposed to do that. I also found I wanted to build on the conversation. My impulse isn't to repeat back. I want to dialogue. I want to share my ideas. And so what I really realized, and I mean, you're just naturally good at it. I was not as good when I first began. And what I learned was I've always thought I was a good listener, but really when I'm listening to people, I'm thinking about my reply. I listened to Anita and I want to tell you all about the conference I went to and the experiences I've had, seeing the harm that can be done to LGBTQ+. I want to share. And so that's not good for empathic listening. I also can be, if I'm enough. If I'm in fight mode or argument mode, I can get really lawyer-like. Like I want to prove you wrong. You know, if it's a high emotion, high stakes kind of conversation, it's an effort for me to work at my listening skills and relaying back to the person and making my effort be on truly hearing them and not just working on my own desire to answer.
Well, I am the very same. And when I did the journalism course, one of my tutors used to say to me, stop injecting yourself into news stories. That was opinion. So I had to train myself. But also, I was absolutely terrible at jumping in and like going in with my reply. And yesterday, even a friend rang me and she's gone through a difficult time, divorce and stuff. And I said, you need to ring this agency because I can say this to you. Two of your other friends can say the same, but you need to hear it from the actual experts that you are living in a coercively controlled, abusive home. And so she did, and she realized, yes, I actually needed, like, while other people say it, when you hear it from an expert. But the other stuff I wanted to say so much more, but I've had to train myself.
Yeah, you know, there's this man in Australia who works specifically with boys, and I have two sons. And so I really pay attention to what he says about how to really develop a strong, good emotional relationship with boys and men. And one of the key things he says a lot, which is it's so important for all of us, is do not interrupt. Let the person speak, no matter how strongly you feel about something, no matter how much. And so what parents tend to do is what he finds is they want to fix the problem. So instead of allowing the child to just talk about their emotions, about the crisis, or even a girlfriend, same thing, the crisis, what happened. And this is true for doctors too. If you can create empathy, and that the researchers repeatedly said that, they said, when doctors develop their empathy and their empathic listening, and they allow for an emotional context, because if you're a patient who's in pain, or if you're a patient who's afraid, you've got symptoms and there's something wrong with you. And here you are, very vulnerable. It could be very mortifying. And you explain it to a doctor, and the doctor can't really go there with you or hear you or show that they care. It makes it so much more difficult. And with a girlfriend, you want to fix her problem. You want to take care of her. You want to protect her. But it was very wise to listen to what she was saying and recognize that she needed to hear the authority voice on this, or she was not going to be able to actually hear it. So,
Yeah.
Anita, what's cool about that is you just showed we have all these different ways of listening that we can get better at. We can all get better at how we listen to each other.
It's living with Paul because before I did any training, because I answer phones, obviously in the Rape Crisis Centre, and I did in a cancer support centre that I worked in. So obviously you just have to listen, let the client speak. But Paul had done training and volunteered in Childline for years, and it's all active listening. And he is like that, just completely blank. And, you know, sometimes, like I even say here when he's listening, he'd say, yeah, no, that's great. And I'd say, well, tell your face that. He's just so good at it.
Yeah.
And I think I picked up stuff like that along the way as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think a really good exercise for people, if you struggle with empathic listening, all of us, we're going to struggle, but especially in what's called hot cognition. So a hot cognition moment is when you're arguing with somebody, or it's very high stakes. You know, let's say you're arguing with a colleague who you think is being maltreated, and they're insisting that everything's fine. And so it's very emotional, high stakes for you. I mean, it could be any one of those situations, or you have to stand up for yourself. Let's say you're in an abusive situation and you actually need to speak truth to power. So what happens is on a physiological, on a body level, and this is automatic, we're not choosing this, our brain and body, our nervous system, which connects the two, our nervous system feels the emotional signals that we're experiencing because we're starting to get upset. So as we start to get upset, we ramp up. We all know what that feels like. Your heart starts to beat faster. You might start to sweat. you are all of a sudden you're quite inarticulate. You can't get your thoughts clear. You don't remember things. If ever you've been in an emergency and you have to make the 911 phone call, is that what you make in Ireland too?
Yeah.
911.
911. Yeah, on the mobile or 999. Yeah.
If you go to do that and all of a sudden you don't remember how your phone works, well, it's because all kinds of unconscious activation is happening in your body. So if you want to be doing your empathic listening and all of these sort of bodily disruption is happening, it's within your power to say to whomever you're dealing with, give me 5 minutes, give me 10 minutes if you need, give me 5 minutes, 10 minutes alone. I need to be by myself for a moment, whether it's your boss or a spouse or whatever, friend. If you do your slow breathing exercises, so you literally breathe deeply, deeply from your belly, from your diaphragm. And if you put your hands on your belly, you should feel it expanding and contracting. And so as soon as you stop shallow breathing up in your shoulders, which tells your brain and your body that you're in extreme danger, so that it just can't focus, it can't concentrate, it can't be calm, because it's priming you to fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And so what we want to do is stop that sympathetic stress response, that hot cognition moment, and we want to calm ourselves down. It's within our power. It's hard to do. I don't want to make any of this sound like it's easy or that I'm good at it, because I'm not. I find it really hard. I'm a very emotional person. And, I've lost my cool before. Absolutely. We all have. And, it can be completely distressing and mortifying. And once you're calmed down, you look back and you're like, how could I have behaved that way? But when you're activated, there's no stopping you, right? You become like a tiger. So if you do the deep breathing in for 5, breathing out for 5, breathe in for 5, and really try to tell your brain that you're fine. There's no predator. You're completely safe. You're having an argument and you actually would love your brain to come back on side and be a wise advisor and an empathic listener and let you do the best you can, bring your best self to this conflict or crisis so that you can fully show up as yourself and not really activate it. And so when you're doing that, the neuroscientists call it rest and digest. You're activating your parasympathetic stress system, and it's your best friend. It will calm you down in any kind of crisis as long as you're dialoguing with your, and visualizing things that make you feel happy and calm, like your favorite person, your favorite place in the world, scenes of nature, anything that's going to help you get really grounded, really calm. And then you go into your empathic discussion with the other person where you try deep within your heart to truly hear them and not just fight with them.
Yeah. So it does take years of training, because it's taken me 2 decades, I'd say, easily. But you get there in the end.
Yeah. And Anita, I'm super glad you said that, because it also depends on how much trauma you've been through. If you were someone who grew up in a very traumatizing household as a kid, or a traumatizing school or whatever, you are going to get very quickly activated because your brain and nervous system and body are primed to protect you. Survival is number one. And if you've grown up with your survival, emotional or physical or sexual self under duress, you're going to flip right into activation. I mean, you think of the people who at the drop of a hat, they're yelling and screaming and carrying on. We all know people like that. Yeah. And it's probably almost guaranteed because they come from a pretty tough background. So again, it's another, not that you want to say it's okay how they're behaving. They need to be held accountable. It's not helping them or anybody else for them to lose it. At the same time as you can have that empathic feeling of, they're probably from some pretty difficult backgrounds.
If you're finding this conversation valuable, make sure to hit subscribe to the FEMCAST so you never miss an episode of the Gaslit Brain series with Dr. Jen Fraser. And don't forget, her powerful new book, The Gaslit Brain, is out on the 4th of November 2025. You can pre-order your copy right now by clicking the link in our bio. Join us in raising awareness and demanding more psychologically safe workplaces and communities. This is the FEMCAST.
Jen, is there strategies we can use to work with people who quickly get activated and go from 0 to 90? Like I shared something months ago when it went viral of that gentleman on the tube with the woman, and he's abusing her, and he's just shouting and screaming and spitting in her face as he's screaming at her. And he like just really, really aggressive, violent, without using violence, if you know what I mean. He's not hitting her, but he's screaming at her. And people stood back and filmed it. And then he got down and he did a crossword. So he was able to bring himself back really quickly after he got all this venom out. He was just absolutely vile. But in work, you know, people go off and they use I'm stressed, which is not an excuse. You're going to regulate yourself. Like you spoke about earlier there, like breathing into your tummy. You feel it when the diaphragm goes out. You're breathing in for 5, out for 5. So you're going to remain calm. But to bring them to like where you are and bring them down from the 90 back to 0 so that you can actually have that conversation.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. When you talk about the man on the subway, somebody who is screaming and yelling and highly abusive, really what, even if he doesn't touch your body, those are still assaults because it makes the person fear for their well-being. Somebody yelling and spitting and highly abusive like that is very, very threatening behavior. And then cuts into the crossword puzzle. For me, I can't help but wonder, I would love to have, a neuroscience expert do a study on this. Is that individual psychopathic? Because the psychopathic individual can turn on these types of behaviors and turn them off without any lingering regret or concern, because in fact, and it's a really important point for us to make, their empathy is eroded. And when your empathy gets badly eroded in your brain, it's one of the things that they correlate with psychopathology, because you can do very cruel things, but feel nothing. You don't feel the woman's pain. You don't feel any shame or anxiety about all the people that witnessed you behave that way. You can see that that person is missing core emotional responses to their behavior. Everybody else is traumatized and they don't feel anything. And that oftentimes is connected to eroded empathy. Affective empathy is eroded. So what are the strategies that you could do? I wanted to say that about that gentleman because you probably couldn't help a gentleman like that. But if it was a regular person, like somebody who just was under extreme stress, let's say in their home life, maybe they're recovering from an illness, perhaps they have financial stress or any of the kinds of stresses that we have. They had a fight with their husband before they got to work, and all of a sudden they behave in a activated way. They lose it, they are yelling, or they say an awful comment, or they can't concentrate. It could be anything. So what is the strategy? So as we just discussed before, there are ways that we can self-regulate. One of our best ways to do that is intentional breathing, calming ourselves down, visualization. That's self-regulation. But when we want to join forces and help each other, we have an incredible gift, all of us, which is called co-regulation. It's a word that was coined by Dr. Stephen Porges. And co-regulation is this amazing ability we have, and mammals have it too. We have the ability to calm each other's systems down. And the way you can do it is by, and we talked about it before, but really looking into someone's eyes, put your hand on their shoulder, if appropriate, just give them a hug, if appropriate, show them that you are seeing their anguish, you're hearing their pain, you know they're stressed out, and you're completely there for them. One of the things that they talk about is your facial expression needs to be really caring and welcoming. Like you were very funny talking about your husband, and you said, he'll say, "Oh, that's grand." And then his face is blank, and you'll be like, get your face to express how grand it is.
Tell your face that.
You want him to smile. No, it's a cute thing, right? In the literature, they call it flat affect. When somebody is not showing facial expressions, and it's, we said it with empathic listening, you're actually trying to have a bit of a flat affect so that you can be a mirror, you can be a sounding board for someone. Your job is to repeat back and show them that you're really listening. So, but if you're trying to co-regulate someone, you want to show a really caring face, a really loving face. You want to use physical connection, and you want to use a sing-song prosody voice, which means, and Stephen Porges, it's quite sweet. When he talks about it, he says, think about how people talk to their pets. They'll be like, who's a good boy? Right? Do you hear how I change my voice that way?
Yeah.
That's a co-regulation. We do it naturally with our pets, but we don't do it very often with each other. But I could say, oh, Anita, I'm so happy to see you. Or I could say, Anita, I see how awful you feel. And you can hear my voices going up and down versus, Anita, what is the problem? What do you want? What's going on for you, Anita? And then you're like flat affect. She's using a flat voice. See how that makes you feel like you want to kind of curl up. You don't feel cared for. You don't feel like the person is, going to pull you into their caring, safe energy and make you get better. You don't feel like that. You feel threatened.
I suppose you treat it like you would when you see a toddler and you just wait till they get to the other side of the frustration that they're feeling because they haven't got the words to put to it. And then they start to quieten down and feel calmer because you're calm and you're not reacting.
That is the perfect example. Is a toddler has a temper tantrum, adults have temper tantrums, and you just treat them with so much care. You help them regulate their system. With a little one, you can try to give them some words, you look really afraid. You seem really angry. I know what that feels like, all of that type of care. And, what's a really wonderful thing about this that many people don't know because we're not taught much about our brains. Just a funny twist of fate in a sense. Dr. Stephen Porges's wife is Dr. Sue Carter, and she's an absolutely brilliant scientist. And she studies and has studied for decades sometimes it's called a hormone. We'll call it a hormone for now, oxytocin. And oxytocin, they used to think was only activated between mothers and babies. But actually, they know it's activated during sex as well. Like when you're in a very loving physical interaction with someone, it releases oxytocin in your brain. But now they know, Sue Carter's research now shows that oxytocin gets released when we offer kindness to each other. So you release it in your brain, and I release it in my brain when we take care of each other. I recognize you've had a really hard day in the work that you do. You're such a brave person advocating for other people, caring for them. And you've got compassion fatigue. And so the second I see that, I go and I get you a cup of tea and I create a nice space for you to sit and I listen to you and I care for you with all my co-regulation techniques. And it makes you feel better. You get your energy back and you feel, cared for. Both of us would have oxytocin released in our brains. Now, the really important part about Sue Carter's research is they have found out that oxytocin is extremely good for your health. It helps you fight chronic disease. It's really good for you. We've known for a long time that people who are in a constant state of stress and trauma and toxicity, it erodes your health in terrible, terrible ways. But now we know that if we put in as much effort as humanly possible to being kind, to having compassion, to building up our empathy so that when we need it, it's right there, then it's really good for our health.
And imagine pets do it as well. I'd love to see my brain when I see Dolly walk in and how it lights up because my heart feels really full. There's a night I don't have her. I don't really sleep that well because I can't wait to see her the next day.
Yeah, there's research on animals and how we match our rhythms with animals. We calm down when we're around animals. The love you have for your pet is like the love you have for the people in your life. They're just beloved creatures. And anytime you're feeling that love, you're activating your oxytocin. So it's good for you.
Why not start making that in tablet form?
Well, you know what? It's really kind of sad that you would say that, Anita, because they did. You remember that they started to sell oxytocin. Do you see how they switched the wording around? Not OxyContin,
Oh, yeah. So they used OxyContin and people are looking at it quickly and seeing oxytocin. That'll make me, well, it did bring them to a different high.
It did.
Yeah.
It took their whole country. I can't even get it straight. I can't remember which is the drug and which is the actual hormone.
Well, the hormone is oxytocin and the drug is OxyContin.
Okay, so OxyContin, and there's been massive lawsuits and enormous amounts of money.
No, they switched that word for that. to
feel
the brain.
it tricked the brain. It took your pain away. So co-regulation, empathy, all of those kinds of self-regulation, all of those things take your pain away. They make you feel grounded. They make you feel unafraid. They make you feel seen. They make you feel loving. That's what the drug did. It took your pain away. And that's why they scrambled it. It was like a drug that replaced the hormone, oxytocin.
Oh, wow. I was given that after a surgery a few years ago, and it was absolutely horrible. I wish it had done that to me. It's just made my body feel really light, but my head feel like it weighed a ton. Like I was getting up to go to the bathroom, and it just went, my head was kind of feeling like it was falling. And then I realized, because isn't that like a step down from morphine? And I was like, oh my God, this is just horrible.
Well, I mean, everybody, it's like with vaccines. We all, in general, we react one way, but of course, there's always going to be people that react differently. It's like people with food allergies. Some people had terrible reactions to the COVID-19 vaccine because you never know how all of our bodies are so individual. I mean, in general, it's probably the safest thing, but it wasn't for some people. So you might have had a reaction to it. It's got to be morphine, could be heroin, but it's so addictive.
No,
And
it must be morphine because after surgery they give you morphine and then they step you down and then you come off it. But I came off it straight away because it was just horrible. I didn't like the feeling and they just gave me a milder painkiller.
Yeah, it's the addiction piece and it just destroyed people's lives. It's so tragic.
Just the day I've learned, that's every day's a school day, as I say. I just learned about the oxytocin, OxyContin.
Well, I'm so glad you can get it straight. It activates a kind of dyslexia in my brain where the second I say the drug, then I get all confused about which one is which is why it was designed that way. It was designed to confuse you. It's terrible.
Clever marketing, but awful marketing at the same time. If it was clever for something good, it'd be better, obviously. So we've covered the empathy, the teaching of it. People will think when they see other people, if empathy can be taught, why do we struggle so much? Why? But it can be taught. And I suppose there has to be a willingness there as well, even despite your childhood, despite trauma.
I mean, the most important thing for everybody to know about their brain is that it is wired to repair and recover. Doesn't matter what you've been through. And I'm not dismissing it. I'm not saying it wasn't horrendous and it didn't hurt anybody. Of course it did. But the bottom line is the brain is wired to repair and recover. And we can do many things to make our brains healthy and happy and high performing. And it's just the same thing as going to a therapist or you go to the gym and you lift weights. You can do that same kind of reparative, strengthening work in your brain. One of the best exercises, and we should talk more about this at some point, but one of the best, and I talked about it in the bullied brain, and I talk about it again in the gaslit brain, is brain HQ. Brain headquarters. If you just go www.brainhq.com, it will bring this site up for you. It's inexpensive. It is backed by hundreds of independent research studies. It's designed by an international team of neuroscientists. It's gamified. It's online. You half an hour a day. Anybody who's been through anything or wants to just get sharper, smarter, faster thinker, better memory, better focus, any of these things, that is your program. Half an hour a day. It's game changing. You need to go on Brain HQ because Brain HQ is one of, if not the only program where they can prove that you take the skills that you learn in the game into real life. Your brain actually gets faster, better focused, processing speed, navigation. These areas actually get strengthened. There's lots of other programs out there, but they don't have the backing. They don't have the international research team and the backing that supports it. So I would advise, unless you can find one that has the same amount of independent study behind it, hundreds of studies, I would stick with Brain HQ.
No, I'll do that. I'll check that out. Another thing about empathy that we didn't cover, and if people don't understand it, to get to this place where active listening is the fact, we never mentioned this earlier, is the slowing down is key to empathy as well, is to slow down and actually listen. And so people feel heard.
Well, I'm really glad you said that because there's a number of different things that derail empathy. So speed would be one. When you're in a huge rush, you don't have time to be empathic. So we saw that with doctors. Doctors don't have time to be empathic if they're under extreme pressure to see the next client. They make mistakes, right? They don't have time to listen properly. Alcohol completely derails empathy in the brain. And that's why it's correlated with lots of violence and people behave in ways that they never normally would behave. The internet completely scrambles our brain's ability to feel empathy. So, they talk about the keyboard warrior who says all kinds of cruel things. They are not seeing the recipient. They're not seeing the person cry who reads the hateful message or the message that says that there's, whatever they say about them that totally humiliating. They don't see the pain. And if our brains are designed to register just like an animal does, if you yelp, your dog will suddenly be like, oh my God, are you okay? Did I do something wrong? Humans are the same way. If you and I were talking and you said something to me like, oh, you're stupid, and my eyes filled with tears, you would be like, I'm so sorry. I was just joking. I didn't even mean that. And I'm so sorry. Right? Because we're designed that way. But when you can't see the person and you're cyberbullying somebody, the internet is blocking you from your natural empathic. It's probably eroding your empathy, which means it's very dangerous.
Yes, we covered that in the Bully Brain series because the level of cyberbullying that was going on, and it was because that school child wasn't in front of them. So they could easily just, in WhatsApp groups, in other groups, just banging out text messages and just horrible stuff. They were less brave then when they were face to face and could see the reaction and the harm they were doing.
And I mean, that's a way to measure just how harmed somebody's empathy is, because people that bully other people and see, like, if we go back to that man on the train who was screaming at the woman, my guess is that the woman's facial and bodily expression showed that she was experiencing trauma while he did that. It's not like she just sat there, not thinking much about it. She would have been showing a lot of trauma, and he doesn't care. He doesn't see it. That's empathy erosion. When you no longer feel someone else's pain, it's a big red flag that, you've got empathy erosion, and it's very concerning.
Jen, we didn't cover this, which I'd like to talk about. We've talked about how you see people go from 0 to 90 and you very quickly or activated then or triggered. But what about the people in the workplaces that are passive aggressive, which I find so harmful, because you know what you're getting with the guy or the woman that shouts or reacts quickly and verbalizes it. But it's the passive aggressive that I feel in your body and brain is just more harmful.
Yeah, it's a brilliant thing to talk about because, when we talk about physical abuse and the way the law measures it, the more physical, the more active the abuse that you do, it's taken more seriously. But on a brain level, the more passive a person is, just as you described, it can be much, much more harmful. But the law doesn't understand that. It doesn't take it into understanding. So one of the worst things that people do in gaslighting is they withhold information. So in withholding information, they destabilize you. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how to act. You don't know whether you were supposed to be at a meeting or not. And the passive aggressive approach to it is to imply that the fault lies with you. You didn't remember, or you didn't write it in your agenda, or you do this all the time. And they just chip away at your sense of selfhood and confidence and comfortability and your trust. They chip away at your trust in your own ability to make just a clear, straightforward decision because they're not being upfront. Everything's insinuated or it's put into a question form, So let's pretend you come into the office and you're late, and that never happens, but it just happened this morning. And I say to you, you have a lot of trouble waking up in the morning, don't you, Anita? It just sounds so lighthearted. It just sounds like just a simple throwaway remark. But imagine how that's going to sit with you for the day. It's going to slowly be in your head where you're thinking, am I late all the time? Are people noticing that I'm late? I mean, am I having a problem with my sleeping in? What's wrong with me? And you see, it's very clever. Passive aggressive behaviors make the target look at themselves They don't look, if I was yelling and screaming and shouting, you'd be
People would
looking
look at you.
You'd look at me as the perpetrator. But when I'm passive aggressive and I just make a joke or a throwaway comment or something, or I'm lying, you start to look at yourself because I've made you unstable. And that's how the gaslighting starts to insinuate itself into the abuse culture.
Mm. But even without them saying anything or passing a remark, it's when they come in and they don't speak and they stonewall and they know they're doing it and they make a point of being extra friendly to other people that they normally wouldn't be or care for.
Yeah, I mean, that is a tried and true way to abuse someone. So what they're conveying to you, and it's the way you described it is exactly what they do. What they're conveying to your brain is that you are unworthy and you don't belong. And those are the fundamental lies that prop up the entire bullying system, all the way up to its most sophisticated forms in history, like misogyny, racism, etc. The basic stance is, and it's just abuse, because everybody belongs and everybody's worthy. It doesn't matter who you are, you belong and you're worthy. That is what it is to be a human being. You have those rights. And when people deny those to you, like they don't acknowledge you, they don't say hi, they don't look at you, and then they make an extra effort to show how dismissible you are because they're caring for others, that's just tried and true. And it's one that's particularly painful for me because one of the teachers who many students reported on as being abusive at my son's school, my son told me that he came up with another boy at the end of summer break. And the teacher made a big deal about the boy. Oh, so-and-so, so good to see you. How was your summer? Da, 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 da. And never said a word to my son, as if he was just invisible, didn't exist. And the message is loud and clear. You're not worthy of my attention. You don't even belong here. Go away. And, there was no reason for it. It's just pure cruelty. But abusers love that. They love to have the power of designating who has worth and who doesn't. The favorites that fawn all over them, they have worth and value projected on them by the powerful person. And the rest are, they're put up on pedestals, and the rest are scorned, humiliated, never spoken to, treated like dirt. And that's the whole system. You can see that with world leaders who are running whole nations. They're doing exactly the same thing on a macrocosmic level that can happen on the microcosm level in the workplace.
And I think it's like when you see world leaders doing that, it's like it's giving permission to other people who are less than, they don't have that power, but they have a bit of control and power in an office space. And it's like giving them permission. And it's just disgusting behavior.
It's abuse culture. And it doesn't matter if you're the head of a country or the head of a company or, a coach of a team or a teacher in a classroom. If you are a really damaged person, that is how you will behave, as documented in extensive research.
Mm. Yeah, I was actually saying to my friend yesterday, you've got to understand there's a difference between mental illness and mental health. Some people get confused, like, but I've had mental health problems. But yeah, you may have mental health problems, but the people who are abusing it are mentally ill. There's a big, big difference.
I prefer to use the term, I completely agree with you, but I like to use the term in my work, they have a damaged brain, because it can be seen on a brain scan what's wrong with their brain. I mean, not that a brain scan is the answer to everything. They will have more sophisticated tools in the future, but they study brain scans of people who are cruel and abusive and create these abuse cultures, and they have eroded affective empathy. That's one of their key traits, and it's physical, and it's because their brain is hurt. But, we all walk around and we don't talk about the fact that a bunch of people have brain injuries and it manifests as maltreatment of other people.
Yeah, we don't look at it like an injury, but if we heard somebody fell off a motorbike or had a car accident and had a brain injury, we talk about that brain injury. But yet people who abuse, we don't talk about their injured brain.
And it's contagious. The person with the abused brain in the workplace is infecting other people whose brains are also getting traumatized and hurt because of the way they treat them. It's really a huge health crisis of like epic proportions, and it is not on the radar right now.
But it's funny as well that it's not funny, it's sad actually that it's not on policy when it is such a health crisis. Productivity is down, absenteeism, And you would imagine that leaders, good leaders in corporations and that would make sure that their people are safe, psychologically safe, so productivity is up, therefore profits are up for them and people are happy. But they
Well,
are
and
just completely blinded by this abuse culture.
well, like I said, it's infectious. It starts to become completely normalized. You know, we've seen in history and we're seeing right now in the era that we're living in that highly abusive behavior gets normalized and people just, it's a part of our brain function. It's the experts call it habituation. Our brain will habituate to anything, including abuse cultures like we've seen terribly in history. And that's what we have to be cautious does not happen. So, I mean, this is why I write the books that I do, and you have the podcasts you do, and you work with the people you do, because we have to resist this slide into acting as if abusing people is fine.
Is normal, and we stop normalizing it and using these phrases like that's just the way they are.
Yeah, I literally use that in the Gaslit Brain as an example of habituation. Oh, that's just so and so. He always does that.
No,
At a certain point, your brain stops reacting to it, which is very serious. That's habituation.
which is very sad that you start normalizing it and just go through the day like that's okay. As well as harming others, they're even harming themselves more every day they do this to their brain. So as injured as it is when they start the abuse, the more people they abuse and the more they abuse, they're actually injuring their brain more often. Like you wouldn't get back up on a motorbike without a helmet if you've had the first brain injury. So
Well,
they'll continue it.
yeah. And Dr. Michael Merzenich, that's why he describes these individuals who abuse over decades. He says they become caricatures. They no longer are actually living, breathing, authentic human beings. All they do is repeat their abuse day in, day out. Same words, same clothes, same hotel or school or home or whatever, workplace. It's literally a kind of a broken routine. It's like a play that they can't exit and they just have to keep saying their lines, doing the same things, hurting the next group of people that's coming through. It's just amazing. And so, yeah, they lose their humanity in doing it. They become caricatures, he says.
So I suppose the takeaway from today is to demand and fight for policies to change and education in schools. Teach empathy, and in corporations that they have like an hour a week where they go, right, we're doing empathy. Here, we're going to sit in front of people, look into their eyes, hear what they have to say. I want you to repeat back to me, and I want you to get used to that practice.
Yeah. It would definitely make a different workplace.
Could you imagine the cultures to be so lovely, the kindness and just the gentleness of going in and feeling regulated and safe?
Well, and I mean, there's no reason not to do it. There's extensive research in positive psychology that the more pro-social, the more kindness, the more compassion, the more empathy, the better profits and productivity. There's no reason not to do it. It's very counterproductive to maintain an unhealthy, unsafe, non-productive, non-profitable workplace.
Jen, thank you very much again for the neuroscience and the understanding. I look forward to speaking to you again next week.
Okay, thanks so much, Anita.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the FEMCAST today. If you believe in these conversations and want to help us keep shining a light on gaslighting and psychological harm, hit subscribe now. By reviewing these episodes, you also help us reach more people, raising more awareness so we can keep sharing these vital stories. And don't forget, Jen's groundbreaking new book, The Gaslit Brain, is out on November 4th. You can pre-order your copy today through the link in our bio. Until next time, let's keep building safer, more accountable communities, because together we can end the silence and spark real change. I'm Anita Whyte Moran, and this is the FEMCAST. Today's episode was edited by me and produced by badgoose.ie, the bold new challenger shaking up advertising across Ireland and the UK.